About 700 years before Christ, the king of Assyria sent word to Jerusalem, specifically to the Davidic king at the time, King Hezekiah, saying that just as he had destroyed all these other countries, he was going to come and destroy Jerusalem as well. In fact, the messenger of the king of Assyria, whose name is Rabshakeh, says that it was the Lord that sent him with this message. Of course, Hezekiah, and as we'll learn, Isaiah, the prophet, have a completely different theological view of who is the God of Israel and what his will is. Isaiah 36 and 37 is a wonderful passage of Scripture for us to see how men of God were afraid by the words of those who were evil and found solace and consolation in the Word of God through the prophet Isaiah and through prayer. Let's dive in and take a look. Shalom, welcome to Rob on the Rock. I'm Rob Van Hoff, and today we're going to do a careful reading of two chapters of the prophet Isaiah, chapters 36 and 37, because it's a beautiful passage of Scripture that shows us that in times of tense political unrest and pressure and even fear of men, we see how discourse of religion comes to bear and how we must be clear in terms of theology, and that right theology is crucial because there's times where the situation will be such that different definitions will be being thrown around. And knowing the truth, knowing the true God, knowing his word, and having full faith in him is the only place of sanctuary, the only place of safety. So let's read here Isaiah 36 and 37. This will be from the NASB, and I'll be pausing from time to time with some comments. So here we're going to begin Isaiah 36. Now, in the 14th year of King Hezekiah, Sennacherib, king of Assyria, came up against all the fortified cities of Judah and seized them. And the king of Assyria sent Rabshakeh from Lachish to Jerusalem to King Hezekiah with a large army. And he stood by the conduit of the upper pool on the highway of the fuller's field. Then Eliakim, the son of Hilkiah, who was over the household, and Shebna, the scribe, and Joah, the son of Asaph, the recorder, came out to him, that is to Rabshakeh. Then Rabshakeh said to them, "Say now to Hezekiah, thus says the great king, the king of Assyria, what is this confidence that you have? I say your counsel and strength for the war are only empty words. Now on whom do you rely, that you have rebelled against me? Behold, you rely on the staff of this crushed reed, even on Egypt, on which if a man leans, it will go into his hand and pierce it. So is Pharaoh king of Egypt to all who rely on him. But if you say to me, we trust in Adonai our God, is it not he whose high places and whose altars Hezekiah has taken away, and has said to Judah and to Jerusalem, you shall worship before this altar? Now therefore come, make a bargain with my master, the king of Assyria, and I will give you 2,000 horses, if you're able on your part to set riders on them. How then can you repulse one official of the least of my master's servants and rely on Egypt for chariots and for horsemen? Have I now come up without Adonai, that is, without Lord's approval against this land to destroy it? The Lord said to me, or Adonai said to me, go up against this land and destroy it. So what we hear in the claims of Rabshakeh, who is a messenger of the king of Assyria, Sennacherib, who has already destroyed the northern kingdom, of course, coming against Jerusalem and Judah. He says that the God of Israel, the Lord, Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh, Adonai, actually has sent him. So the claim here is that the God of Israel has actually sent Sennacherib or Assyria to destroy the land, that he actually is presenting himself as a messenger who has received this from the Lord himself. That's challenging then to the Judeans, to the Jews that hear this. Then they have to ask themselves the first question: is this true? Is what Rav Shaka saying, is it true? Because they already have destroyed the northern kingdom. And so there does seem to be some legitimacy to Rav Shaka's claim and the power of the king of Assyria. And if the Lord has actually sent him, then we should obey, right? So this is the challenge. The question is, what is the true word of Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh? The other point is that he undermines, Rav Shaka undermines Hezekiah's authority as of the house of the kingly line, of the house of David. If you say, we trust in the Lord our God, is it not he whose high places and whose altars Hezekiah has taken away? So what Rav Shaka's strategy here is quite clever, but it's deceitful, trying to undermine in the hearers' minds Hezekiah's authority. Because he's saying, look, Hezekiah destroyed all of Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh's altars throughout the land. Well, again, on the insider, if you're with the tradition of the prophets and the scribes of the Mosaic tradition, you know that those had to be destroyed, that it was in service of Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh that Hezekiah rightly destroyed those high places. But in the minds of the people, when they aren't clear, the questions are the people clear on their theology. Rav Shaka is sowing seeds of doubt in the people's minds, the hearers' minds, as to the legitimacy of Hezekiah's actions and the legitimacy of Hezekiah's teaching concerning who is the Lord, the God of Israel. So here again, where Rav Shaka is using Jewish symbols, particularly the name of the God of Israel, the nature of worship in the land of Israel, proper worship place, and then even claiming that the Lord has spoken to him directly. And so attributing to the Lord all his victories and saying, therefore, the city will be mine too. So I know it's kind of a political detail, but we need to pay attention to this. So let's see the reaction now. 36:11. Then Eliakim and Shebna and Yoah said to Rav Shaka, speak now to your servants in Aramaic, Aramit, in the Aramaic language, for we understand it, and do not speak to us in Yehudit, or Jewish language, or Judean, in the hearing of the people who are on the wall. So right off the bat, we see that Hezekiah's courtiers, Eliakim, Shebna, etc., are concerned that the Judeans, the people who are on the wall, are hearing this. So they're a little bit afraid. They're saying, speak to us in Aramaic, which is the broader common language. But Rav Shaka says, has my master sent me only to your master? And to you to speak these words, and not to the men who sit on the wall, doomed to eat their own dung and drink their own urine with you? So what are these words? Again, he continues confidently to speak in Yehudit, which we would call Ivrit, Hebrew, but it's Yehudit, as opposed to Aramit, Aramaic. Now, this is words designed to instill even greater fear in the people. We're not talking about Hezekiah and his inside, his courtmen, of course, but we're talking about the people on the wall that are hearing this. They're going to be terrified. This picture of eating their own dung and drinking their own urine, this is meant to go right into the heart. These are arrows into the heart. Verse 13, then Ravshakeh stood and cried with a loud voice in Yehudit, that is in Hebrew, but we call it here Yehudit or Judean, and said, hear the words of the great king, the king of Assyria. Thus saith the king, do not let Hezekiah deceive you, for he will not be able to deliver you. Again, continuing this insistence to separate the people and their fears and their best interest from the legitimate king who represents the line of David, which is God's protected line. That he's instilling them the idea that Hezekiah now is like the serpent in the garden, deceiving. He will not deliver you, nor let Hezekiah make you trust in the Lord, saying, the Lord will surely deliver us. This city will not be given into the hand of the king of Syria. Do not listen to Hezekiah, for thus says the king of Assyria, make your peace, literally bracha, make your blessing with me. Come out to me and eat each of his vine and each of his fig tree, and drink each of the waters of his own cistern, until I come and take you away to a land like your own land, a land of grain and new wine, a land of bread and vineyards. Beware that Hezekiah does not mislead you, saying, the Lord will deliver us. I'll pause right here in the middle of verse 18. So again, we see Ravshakeh's strategy to separate the people by getting them afraid from God's ordained leadership, which is Hezekiah. And as we'll see, the prophet Isaiah. This is Isaiah relating to us this whole story. We can see it also in the book of 2 Kings. What Ravshakeh is telling the people of Judea is not to trust Hezekiah's words about spiritual things. Do not trust Hezekiah about who the Lord is and what the Lord will do. Do not trust his leadership or his faith. And he's using twisted language, saying, don't let Hezekiah deceive you. Don't let Hezekiah mislead you. This is powerful political and demonic even rhetoric. Has any one of the gods of the nations delivered his land from the hand of the king of Assyria? So now he's saying, look at Sennacherib's successes through all the lands. Have any of those gods of those lands delivered those people from the hand of Sennacherib? And the answer is no. Where are the gods of Hamath and Arpad? Where are the gods of Sepharvaim? And when have they delivered Samaria from my hand? So here we see again what Ravshakeh is saying is the religion, if you want to use that word, the religion, the devotion to the different gods, which we know are idols, and we see this, Hezekiah makes this claim soon enough. They're clinging to their gods, their Elohim did not save them. And the logic now, Ravshakeh is changing his strategy. He's no longer legitimizing the Lord, the God of Israel, but he's saying you're no different than anyone else. None of their gods will deliver them, and in the same way, your God will not deliver you. Verse 20, who among all the gods of these lands have delivered their land from my hand, that the Lord would deliver Jerusalem from my hand? So from Ravshakeh's perspective, all these nations have their own gods, and the God of Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, the God of Jerusalem, is no different. Verse 21, but they were silent and answered him not a word, for the king's commandment was, do not answer him. Then Eliakim the son of Hilkiah, who was over the household, and Shebna the scribe, and Joah the son of Asaph the recorder, came to Hezekiah with their clothes torn, and told him the words of Ravshakeh. Now we're going to go to the next chapter, Isaiah 37. And when King Hezekiah heard it, he tore his clothes, covered himself with sackcloth, and entered the house of the Lord. Then he sent Eliakim, who was over the household, with Shebna the scribe and the elders of the priests, covered with sackcloth, to Isaiah the prophet, the son of Amoz. And they said to him, Thus says Hezekiah, this day is a day of distress, rebuke, and rejection. For children have come to birth, and there is no strength to deliver. Perhaps the Lord your God will hear the words of Rabshakeh, whom his master, the king of Assyria, has sent to reproach the living God, Elohim Achai, Elohim, the living God, and will rebuke the words which the Lord your God has heard. Therefore, offer a prayer for the remnant that is left. So Hezekiah rightfully goes to the house of worship and sends word to Yeshayahu, the prophet, Isaiah. Verse 5, so the servants of King Hezekiah came to Isaiah. Isaiah said to them, Thus you shall say to your master, that is to Hezekiah, Thus saith the Lord, do not be afraid because of the words that you have heard, with which the servants of the king of Assyria have blasphemed me. Behold, I will put a spirit in him so that he will hear a rumor and return to his own land, and I will make him fall by the sword in his own land. I love this. The first words of do not fear. Why do they need to hear this? It's because the message is one of fear. Rabshakeh is instilling nothing but fear. He's saying, look at what I've done. Those nations' gods didn't help them, and we destroyed them. You're no different. And then he'll say, don't trust your leadership. He doesn't know what he's doing. And even your God even sent me to destroy this city. He's undermining every claim to legitimacy of the house of David and genuine trust in the Lord, which the people are afraid because the image, the most brutal image is of them eating their own dung and drinking their own urine. This is fearful stuff. But what does Isaiah say to these men, to the messengers to take back to Hezekiah? Thus saith the Lord, do not be afraid because of the words you have heard. And these are words with which the servants of the king of Assyria have blasphemed me. We should never be afraid of words that are spoken like Rabshakeh's. Isaiah is not disturbed by these words. Neither are any of the prophets of Israel ever dismayed by the fearful threats and words of men. And the words of the prophets lead us back to genuine faith. What is the true faith of the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob? And Isaiah is doing that here. Verse 7, behold, we already read that. Verse 8, then Rabshakeh returned and found the king of Assyria fighting against Libnah, for he had heard that the king had left Lachish. When he heard them saying concerning Tirhakah, king of Cush, which is Ethiopia, he has come out to fight against you. And when he heard it, he sent messengers to Hezekiah, saying, that is, so Rabshakeh left and then sent messengers back to Hezekiah with letters written that we'll see here. Thus you shall say to Hezekiah, king of Judah, do not let your God in whom you trust deceive you. So now Rabshakeh has changed his tone again. He's gone from, the Lord had sent me to destroy you. The Lord told me to come and destroy you, to don't let Hezekiah deceive you or mislead you, to now he's saying, don't let the God in which you trust deceive you. So these are arrows of the enemy. Say to Hezekiah, do not let your God in whom you trust deceive you, saying, Jerusalem will not be given into the hand of the king of Assyria. Behold, you have heard what the kings of Assyria have done to all the lands, destroying them completely. So will you be spared? Did the gods of those nations which my fathers have destroyed deliver them, even Gozan and Haran and Rezeph and the sons of Eden, who were in Telassar? Where is the king of Hamath, the king of Arpad, and the king of the city of Sepharvaim? and of Hannah and Eva. Then Hezekiah took the letter from the hand of the messengers and read it. And he went up to the house of the Lord and spread it out before the Lord. Hezekiah prayed to the Lord, saying, Adonai Tzevaot, O Lord of hosts, the God of Israel, who is enthroned above the cherubim. You are the God, you alone, of all the kingdoms of the earth. You have made heaven and earth. Incline your ear, O Lord, and hear. Open your eyes, O Lord, and see, and listen to all the words of Sennacherib, who sent them to reproach the living God. Truly, O Lord, the kings of Assyria have devastated all the countries and their lands, and have cast their gods into the fire. For they were not gods. Literally, it says, for they are not Elohim, but the work of men's hands, wood and stone. So they have destroyed them. Now, O Lord our God, deliver us from his hand, that all the kingdoms of the earth may know that you alone, Adonai, are God. Now, the our God here is in the 2 Kings passage, which reiterates the same story. In the Isaiah, it just says you Adonai alone. And it's implied are the only Elohim. So what we see here in Hezekiah's prayer is that is a different theology than that being taught by Rav Shakeh. Rav Shakeh is reiterating over and over again that each nation has their own gods, and that none of those gods had this power to deliver them. And it's going to be no different for Israel, no different for Jerusalem, that is, because it's just another people with another God, and Sennacherib's going to wipe them away. Well, that's a different theology than that of Hezekiah, whose theology is accurate and is the one we want to attend to and learn from. Because indeed, Hezekiah knows that they have had victory, that is, the Assyrians, over all these nations, and have destroyed their gods. But it's a different meaning of the same general concepts that Rav Shakeh is teaching. What Hezekiah understands, as reflected in his prayer, is that yes, those people were destroyed. Yes, those people had their own gods, but those gods never had power. They were idols. It says that they cast their gods into the fire, for they are not gods, but the works of men's hands. So the difference between Hezekiah's theology and that of the twisted kind of cut and paste theology of Rav Shakeh is one where the God of Israel is called the living God, the only God, the creator of heaven and earth. And the gods of the nations are said to have been cast into the fire because they are not really Elohim. They are the works of men's hands, wood and stone. And then we have at the end here that you alone are God, which was taken in the Greek translation, theos monos, alone, where we get the word monotheism, one God. Okay, we're going to continue here, 37:21. Then Isaiah the son of Amoz sent word to Hezekiah, saying, Thus saith the Lord, the God of Israel, because you have prayed to me about Sennacherib, king of Assyria, this is the word that the Lord has spoken against him. She has despised you and mocked you, the virgin daughter of Zion. She has shaken her head behind you, the daughter of Jerusalem. Whom have you reproached and blasphemed? And against whom have you raised your voice and haughtily lifted up your eyes? Against the Holy One of Israel. Through your servants you have reproached the Lord. And you have said, With my many chariots I came up to the heights of the mountains, to the remotest part of Lebanon, and I cut down its tall cedars and its choice cypresses, and I will go to its highest peak, its thickest forest. I dug wells and drank waters, and with the sole of my feet I dried up all the rivers of Egypt. Have you not heard? Long ago I did it. From ancient times I planned it. Now I have brought it to pass that you should turn fortified cities into ruined heaps. Therefore their inhabitants were short of strength. They were dismayed and put to shame. They were as the vegetation of the field and as the green herb, as grass on the housetops is scorched before it is grown up. But I know you're sitting down, and you're going out, and you're coming in, and you're raging against me. Because of your raging against me, and because your arrogance has come up to my ears, therefore I will put my hook in your nose, my bridle in your lips, and I will turn you back by the way which you came. Then this shall be a sign for you. You will eat this year what grows of itself, in the second year what springs from the same, and in the third year sow, reap, plant vineyards, and eat their fruit. The surviving remnant of the house of Judah will again take root downward and bear fruit upward. For out of Jerusalem will go forth a remnant, and out of Mount Zion survivors. The zeal of the Lord of hosts will perform this. So what we see in those words from Isaiah is a shift in viewpoint. Just to go back and clarify that, he has the statement first, the Lord speaking to Sennacherib concerning Sennacherib's pride. Who have you blasphemed, etc.? It's the Holy One of Israel. And you thought you did all these victories that you think you are so wonderful. And then in verse 26, it shifts to where the Lord is saying, I did it. Have you not heard this, Sennacherib? That I did this from ancient times. This was my plan. I decreed it. In other words, everything that Sennacherib has succeeded in his attacks in the Levant were by God's design, the creator of heaven and earth. And then at the end, he says, I'm going to send you back. And then in verse 30, he shifts now, Isaiah, to a word of encouragement for Jerusalem. This will be a sign for you. You will eat this year what grows of itself, the second year what springs up from the same, and third year sow, reap, plant vineyards, eat their fruit. The surviving remnant of the house of Judah will again take root downward and bear fruit upward. So the Lord is with you. That's what Isaiah is saying. Let's continue, verse 33. Therefore, thus saith the Lord concerning the king of Assyria, he will not come to this city or shoot an arrow there. He will not come before it with a shield or throw up a siege ramp against it. By the way that he came, by the same he will return. He will not come to this city, declares the Lord. For I will defend this city to save it for my own sake and for my servant David's sake. What does that mean? David's been dead for how many hundreds of years when this word is coming through, word of the Lord through the prophet Isaiah? It's because Hezekiah is of the line of David. And of course, the Messiah is going to be born many generations from here, of course. But the Lord has a plan to save the city for my own sake and for my servant David's sake. Verse 36, then the angel of the Lord went out and struck 185,000 in the camp of the Assyrians. And when men arose early in the morning, behold, all of these were dead. So Sennacherib, king of Assyria, departed and returned home and lived at Nineveh. It came about as he was worshiping in the house of Nisroch his god, that Adramelech and Sharezer his sons killed him with the sword. And they escaped into the land of Ararat, and Esarhaddon his son became king in his place. That's the end of Isaiah 37. A funny note here where it says he was worshiping in the house of Nisroch, his god. The Septuagint translates this with an Aramaic word meaning idol. He was worshiping his idol. So the emphasis, of course, then in that Targum, that understanding, is that the gods of the nations are the works of men's hands. They are twisted and evil-hearted men. They have no life in them. They trust in strength. and they are blind to the kingdom of God. They are blind to the kingdom of the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. But Hezekiah is humble. He is secure in the lineage of the promised seed of David. And he rightly goes to the Lord, and he rightly reaches out for intercession from the true prophet, from Isaiah the prophet. And together, they communicate, which is preserved in writing for us, true theology. What is good and what is pure and holy and crucial for us to know in a time where these arrows of words that are painful to hear, and that if the people believe them, they will collapse. It will just only weaken them. Rather, they need to not respond to the attacks, just like Hezekiah told them, do not answer him. And so that's a step of differentiation, and then turning inward, turning to the Lord, turning to the prophet, and waiting patiently in prayer for the marching orders, for direction. And of course, the beginning of that word from the Lord is, do not fear. You shall not fear his words. And we learn again that God is true. He says, for my name's sake and for the sake of my servant David. What does this mean? It means God's purposes they span throughout all of creation, the timeline of all history. And any one of us only has one small little life in that larger time span. So what we learned here through Isaiah the prophet, that even Sennacherib's victories were already established by the Lord. But he did it blindly, attributing it to himself rather than the true God. We also learned that God's covenant with David, his promise to David, still endured, even though many generations of Jews had come and gone already by the time of Isaiah. That God was not changing. He would hold true to his covenant promises and would continue to, all the way to see it come fulfillment, that the Messiah would be born in Bethlehem, as we know. So, thanks for joining me in this close-ish reading of Isaiah 36 and 37. And I pray it's a blessing to you as you seek to sharpen your own theology, your understanding of who is God, what does it mean to be on his team, such as King Hezekiah, Isaiah the prophet, and how those words are for us to chew on, to meditate upon, and to see this is our team, not the Rav Shekes of the world, but the God of Israel. Shalom.